years, doctors have treated men and women the same way when it comes to fighting diseases. But new research is showing how dangerous this can actually be. Here with more information is UCLA cardiologist Dr. Karol Watson. Thank you for being back with us again, Doctor.
Nice
Thank you
so
much.
There's books out there. Men are from Mars, women are from Venus, and yet the medical community has said, you're all from the same planet, we're going to treat you the same.
Right.
Saying that's not a good thing now. Why has it taken so long to figure this out?
It's a great question, because when you think about it, intuitively, we get it. Men and women are different.
Yeah.
Christina, if you went out to dinner with a 280-pound male colleague, would you eat the same amount of food?
Well, couldn't.
Drink the same number of drinks?
Couldn't.
No, we get it. When men and women need different amounts. That's something that we haven't always used in the medical profession, however. So many of the studies that were done for years, I mean, up until about 30 years ago, were done exclusively in men. And there were several reasons for this. Men are cleaner for experiments.
What does that mean?
That means they don't have hormones that fluctuate every month. They don't get pregnant. They're easier to put in research trials, and you know you're going to get the same thing every time. If you included women, you'd have to say, okay, let's make sure they're on the same time of their cycle. Let's make sure no one's going to get pregnant. Let's make sure these things are...
Oh, so it's a matter of convenience then?
It's not convenience. It's not convenience. It was a matter of standardizing things, because you really can't get a good experiment until you can get things standardized.
Right.
But what that then did was it made us say that it must mean that whatever we find in all these men, it must work for women, because the prevailing theory was men and women are pretty much the same, except for reproductive organs and hormones. Right. But other than that, they're just the same.
But I understand, too, that a lot of the research for heart attacks, a lot of the research went into men, but their arteries are larger than our arteries are, and ours are, and we have different symptoms than men have.
Very, very different. And the research, again, we learned how to prevent heart disease in men, we learned how to diagnose it in men, and we learned how to treat it in men. And we just assumed we could just transfer all that over to women. But it wasn't for years later that we finally said, well, let's actually test these things out in women. And that's what happened with the most recent announcement by the Food and Drug Administration. This drug, Ambien, was on the market for over 20 years. And just recently they said, you know, we said everybody should have this same dose, but we've just done some new studies and realized that if women take the same dose as men do, they end up impaired the next morning to a dangerous extent. So it wasn't just...
Well, now, what do you mean impaired? Do you mean that we're groggy, we can't make decisions that we normally should be making with a clear head?
All the things that they say do not operate machinery,
vehicles.
all of those
Exactly.
things.
So they actually did reaction times, driving tests, and they realized that women, even after what should be the safe period, were still impaired.
So if a man then would take even a larger dose of Ambien, they would still be impaired the next day?
So they didn't test any doses beyond what they recommend, but the presumption is that if a man then took enough of a dose, they also would be impaired. But what's happening to women is that even if they take the standard dose that's recommended, they probably are getting twice the effective dose of what a man would.
I mean, I took a half of an Ambien one time. Ambien is no joke, you guys. I got on a plane. It was a cross-country flight. A friend of mine, and I'd been traveling a lot, said, listen, you'll be able to sleep. It's a red eye. Take this. You'll be fine. 10 years ago, I said, okay. I said, I don't know. I don't take pills. I took half. The flight, I fell asleep before the flight took off. It was like a James Bond type pill. No joke. The flight landed. I was asleep. The flight attendant woke me up and said, you know, we've landed. You have to get your... I said, my gosh, what happened? So I started getting my things, and I thought, something smells like chocolate. What is going on? And this is funny, but it's not funny because it erased my memory completely. I had cookie and chocolate all in my hair.
From what?
Because when they come around to give you cookies in the middle of the flight, she said, you don't remember what you did? I said, no, what did I do?
You used it as a pillow?
She said, I reached up and just grabbed it off the tray and went like this and smushed it in my face. I have no recollection of this.
Be laughing, I'm sorry.
I know, yes, I'm sure it's funny for the people around, but that was really scary.
Yeah,
terrifying.
I have no recollection. Chocolate all over my face and cookie in my hair from taking half an Ambien.
And that's because you're not just a woman, but you're a tiny woman. So the dose you took was probably much too much for your...
I want to talk about the aspirin right now, because they say that you should be taking a low-dose baby aspirin for women to prevent heart attacks. But I found out that it's okay for men to use it because it helps them with heart attacks. does nothing for women except for stroke. So when did this happen? This is the first time I've heard about this.
About 1989, the first study came out. The first study came out, and it was called the Physician's Health Study. They studied regular aspirin in men only, and 5 years later, they found out these men had many fewer heart attacks. So they said, this is great. If a man is of 50 years or older, they should take this. And why don't we say everybody 50 years or older should take a low dose of aspirin to prevent a heart attack?
And that doesn't work for women?
Well, that stood for about 20 years. And then finally, they said, you know, we really should do the same research in women. So they did the Women's Health Study. And what they did was low dose aspirin in women to try to prevent heart attack. And they found, lo and behold, no difference at all. But they did find something good. They said these women were actually having fewer strokes. When they looked in men back 20 years earlier, they did not see any reduction in strokes. What they found, the women taking low-dose aspirin had fewer strokes, but no change in heart attack.